Hello, everyone, and welcome to Deckbuilding Derezzed. I'm your host, Code Marvelous, and today I'm joined by a friend from the Welsh meta, Mechanoise. Thanks for coming on
Hey
the show,
everyone.
man.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man. We're crossing time so that I can discuss a very interesting interpretation of smoke that you've had a lot of success with. But before we get into that, why don't you tell me a little bit about your Netrunner story, how you got into the game, and what kind of attracted you to smoke and building this archetype?
Sure. It all started with the original Android game, the big board game with the puzzle piece on the top and the beautiful map of New Angeles. I got into the lore with that, and it was my wife who bought the Netrunner card game. And while she was doing her studying, at one point she threw me the rule book and said, "Here, could you learn how to play it after I'm done studying? We'll play a game together." And as I was reading it, got into the game really heavily. And from there, just been collecting the data packs probably as far back as 2.5 years and so. So it was about 2013, early 2014, I started getting into it. Um, and have recently been taking the competitive meta a little bit more seriously. Actually starting to watch more videos, starting to view more podcasts, actually studying the meta and seeing what can work and what doesn't.
Sure.
And the reason why I chose Smoke, I'm a big fan of Shapers, and I always have been. For an entire year or so, I played as Kit Peddler, and absolutely loved her ability and how it kind of forced the corporation to reconsider their ice position.
Right.
And I decided to go back to Shaper for one of the competitive matchups before Quorum got released, and I was using Kate McCaffrey with a lot of Link to counter the CTM matchups, and she was using a stealth rig there. And so when Quorum got released, Aaron Moran came out, and a lot of people were not playing CTM anymore and going for more of Spags' what's it called, the Super Friends
Or the
build.
Sandvich. Yeah, the Sandvich, Super Friends.
The
Yeah.
sandwich one, yeah, that's the one. I decided, well, since people are playing that quite a lot, I don't really need the Link as much. So I transferred over to Smoke, who was obviously great for the stealth build anyway. She's 5 cards less than Kate in terms of her maximum deck size, and she's just awesome to play as. She's great fun.
Yeah, she's also super rich in the lore of Netrunner. Like she's all over some of the most ubiquitous cards in
Yeah,
Netrunner, which is kind of cool. But yeah,
yeah.
so Smoke, very cool. 4015 recurring stealth credit. Let's get into it. Where would you like to start? Events, hardware, resources, programs.
We can go from top to bottom, not a problem. Just we can skim over the stuff that's kind of obvious and talk about more flavorful stuff when we come to them.
Yeah. So we have a single freedom through equality, which is seeing play in a lot of runner decks. I would say, especially shaper decks, are tending to run this as their current. Tell me a little bit about the inclusion of this in this deck.
Okay, so first ask yourself, what's the most common 5/3 in the game? It's Global Food Initiative. For the obvious reason that if the runner is, if the corp is running a bunch of 3/2s or 4/2s and is running the global foods to pack up the agenda density, then it's going to force the runner to steal 4 agendas in order to get the points. Whereas with Freedom Through Equality, which matches with the indexing, which we'll get to, it means that you only effectively, hopefully, have to steal 3 agendas with this in combination, and that'll get you the win a little bit earlier.
Correct, and that's yeah, it's just really solid, and there's a lot of currents flying around on both sides, so it's good also just to be able to clear a really oppressive current.
Mm, very much, yeah.
So we got 3 diesels. I hear it gives you flames. Card draw is really good, especially when you're on a 40 card deck.
Yeah, you'll notice that aside from Netmarker, the diesels is the only real draw method in here.
Right,
We don't have any quality times. We don't have Patron, so it's kind of important to go and at least find something to chew through the deck with.
right. We have 3 dirty laundries. Pretty good. We're going to be making cheap runs, I imagine. That's the dream. So Dirty Laundry rewards us for that.
Yeah, we intend to hopefully be running quite often. And combos with Temujin contracts, it's again, it's a nice little economy card. You're doing what you're normally meant to be doing, and you're getting hopefully 3 credits for the privilege as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is where a lot of the smoke decks tend to diverge from, I guess, what we would say the more traditional Shaper builds that are running RDIs, right? Or a Kate stealth build would be running probably more RDIs for that hard R&D lock. Whereas in Smoke, I've seen a trend across a lot of the lists that they're running 2 or 3 indexing. So tell me a little bit about the choice of indexing as your R&D threat over R&D interface.
I've been using R&D interface quite a lot in Kate. Obviously, you get that big discount, which, it is a big discount in the end when you tally up how many hardwares and programs she does end up installing. I find indexing is great because it's a zero-cost play. And it's not only just for the fact of being able to reorder the corporation's R&D. It's just for the obvious, right? You get a feel of what they're running. You get a feel of like, okay, so where are my stealth credits going to be taxed through what kind of ice is about to come up?
Right.
And you've got that beauty of knowing that you're going to put an agenda on top so that you can run back, hopefully with no Jacksons on the board. You can run back, grab the agenda off the top after you've played the Freedom to Equality, because you know now this is the right time to play it.
Yeah. It's also just like a devastating mental play, because a lot of times if you index and maybe you only see one agenda and you go in and get it, your opponent will like draw all of the other cards to try to like. Sometimes they'll try to like draw through the cards so that you don't have as much knowledge, right?
Exactly. Yes. There was a nice little fun play I've done once or twice. This without. And we'll see if it comes up today, is that when I indexed, I suspected there was a Jackson on the board that I'd forgotten to trash, but after I indexed, there were no agendas. So I put it down and I thought, screw it, let's do it. Ran back on R&D again, and he forced a Jackson to shuffle out for nothing. And it pulled me a 2-1, but still pulled me an agenda off top. Right. So he actually gave me an agenda. It's through luck, but yeah, it's that mental play, as you say, that, well, I don't want them to know how far they are down in knowledge of what the deck does and what's coming up.
Yeah. So we have 2 influence for 2 Peace in Our Time, which is a card that I'm kind of excited about. It was kind of panned when it was spoiled, but then, especially in Shapers, it's seeing a lot of play. So talk to me a little bit about the Peace in Our Time in here.
Well, as I said, this smoke build is a butcher of my Kate deck, and the Kate deck was nicknamed Jackpot Kate because it was running loads of economy-based stuff. And it had initially, what was it, Lucky Find in there. Now, when you think that's 2 influence for a double click to give you 6 credits, whereas this is, as long as it's the first click and the other conditions are met, this gives you 10 credit. This gives you 10 credits of the cost of 1, so you explode with 9 credits. Now, when you do that at the very start and you're looking at a lot of setup pieces, to just, even if you're giving that corp that 5, with stealth builds, normally getting through ice is pretty cheap, or at least is meant to be. And getting that explosion of credits up at the very start at least helps you get a couple of the pieces on the board, because as you notice, we're not running Korea Fair. So that at least helps with a couple of the 3-cost resources. And as well, just to, well, I get a piece of my time and then slap out a bunch of breakers. And now the threat is on because I can get through pretty much any piece of ice, or at least that's the thought. It's just great for money. And there have been plenty of times I've not used a turn to run. And I'm not too bothered about the corp having the 5 credits.
Right. And if you can make that read, right, and be like, well, I wasn't going to run this turn anyway. Let's do this, So we have sure gambles. Don't really need to belabor that too much. It's really good for your opening hand. We have only a single clone chip. So usually a lot of times, especially in stealth builds, you're seeing 1 or 2 clone chips for some sort of clot recursion, or also just build and setup acceleration. You've only got the one. So talk to me about the inclusion of a clone chip. What's the targets that you're using it for a lot of times?
Recur
And
programs that are sorry,
go
carry
ahead.
on.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Recur programs that have been destroyed by carelessness or batties, and that has happened without any form of program recursion. The singleton batty, which I'm starting to see come up quite a bit now, well, if it hits the wrong program, then it can be quite devastating. But there have been instances where I've uh, uncommon instances where I've come up against like a bunch of Ichis, and when I need to, yeah, I'll just save the stealth credits, let it trash the program, and then recur it again just for the sake of that game win. It's there just as a safety measure, but you've also got the capacity to bring back your clone ship as well if you need to. So even if you haven't got the threat of Batty, one clone ship with one SMC with this effectively makes two SMCs, and you can get two programs out if you need to.
Solid. So we have Plascrete Carapace. It's creeping its way back in as mid-season decks come back.
Yes.
Buys you that turn of life.
Exactly, that's exactly what it was. I mean, it doesn't obviously survive you against a double boom, but it survives you a single boom with enough cards in hand. So at least this will delay them doing the 24/7 boom if it does happen. They know that they need to get the double boom if your hand size stays above what it needs to. Basically, you don't die. That's the whole game. Don't die.
Yeah, basically.
Hmm.
So you have two Cipher.
Yes,
Ubiquitous these days, very powerful.
it is. From a thematics point, I've made it clear I'm not a big fan of the card because I don't like the idea that it does sort of bring super solid ice down to zero as if it was any other ice. But what I do love about it is that it's got that big two memory, which is going to be good for one of our other programs, and it also works very well in stealth if you're running Switchblade, because then you don't have to use the second stealth credit to boost Switchblade.
Yeah. Well, let's just jump to the primary interaction that makes this deck hum. So we have Cipher, which can make a piece of ice, zero strength, as you mentioned, using all of the secrets that Null has on his briefcase.
Yep.
And then you use that in tandem with Paintbrush, where you can take a res piece of ice and turn it into another subtype, or I should say, additionally give it the subtype.
Yes.
So, like, if you have, let's say, a curtain wall, you could turn that into a sentry, and suddenly you're breaking that for 1 credit on Switchblade.
Yep.
Feels pretty good.
Oh, it's absolutely beautiful when it works. When you can paint and break things like hives as well. I mean, just for the not or what was initially the idea for was is it Next Silver, the one that gains all those horrendous subroutines.
Yeah, it's very taxing for smoke.
It is because I don't want to get into the habit of if I'm against a next deck. I don't want to get into the habit of being fearful of running pieces of ice, forcing additional reses to power up other next ice. Next bronze isn't too much of a problem because of Refractor's strength, but with next silver getting those additional subs, that does drain the money. So why not paintbrush it, cipher it, and then walk through it with one stealth credit for Switchblade?
Yeah, every day's a good day when you paint.
Yes, it is.
This is such an interesting card. And I remember when it was spoiled, people tried so hard to make it work. And I think it does work, but only in a handful of decks that can really leverage it. And you have to
Yes.
know when to not be too attached to it.
That's an excellent point on that because you can get into a habit of feeling like you have to paintbrush everything, but you've got to remember that you've got to say, is it worth losing that click over? Because clicks are precious. You're thankfully going to get some back with Beth if they're over on the 15 credit mark. But what
Which
you want to do
which they will be because we have no cred denial here.
exactly, and Peace in Our Time is going to help boost them up. But the idea is you want Paintbrush there to just go, right, I want that piece of I'm happy to spend a click to save me spending an extra, say, 4 credits to break the hive, for an example.
Right.
So you've got to evaluate the trade-off and, as you say, not get too overzealous with your artisan ways.
Yeah. So moving down to resources, we have two Beth, which you mentioned is just synergistic with peace in our time, and
Hmm.
also just a very solid shaper acceleration card.
It is, yes. Just to have, I mean, she's another, contradicting what I said earlier, she's at least another draw method. But what I have found or tend to find is that I get a click with her.
Yeah.
Um, as you said, there is no econ denial in this deck, and it's not too bad. You're mostly okay with a corp having money because they're going to mostly spend their money on rezzing their ice, and if the ice is big, then it doesn't pose a big tax for us. We
Right.
can either cipher them, or we can just use the stealth credits and the paintbrush to get through them, hopefully with relative ease.
Yeah, and this is right. This is highly synergistic.
Yes.
We got 3 daily casts. Clickless economy. See, I've kind of always oscillated between daily casts or dirty laundry, but
Mm,
because of the way you've constructed this deck, you have more slots because you're not packing the same silver bullets that I was packing in my smoke build. So you have room for both. Like this deck is very flush with money, which is one of Smoke's problems in the early to mid game. I find is that she doesn't have real money.
yes, that's right. So daily cast is good. I mean, you notice I've not packing any career fairs, so it's always a hard install, which is not so much of a problem because if you've got peace in our time, then you have got a forcible turn with which to install things. Daily casts will at least give you 5 credits, net after the whole of it. The clickless economy is always nice to have, and I keep that with Dirty Laundry because I always wanted to be up on money. I wanted to try and avoid the idea that they could threaten a point of, well, he is low on money, so there's not much that he can do in terms of maybe trashing stuff in means of getting back multiple times. So I want to try and keep the money going well, and Daily Cast is a really nice card for that.
Yeah, we have film critic because we don't want to get mid-seasoned.
That's exactly the reason why. Aaron's going to be switching off C-Source. Hard-hitting news isn't too much of a problem if we keep the money high because they can't act on it the same turn. But mid-seasons is a serious threat. So that's why she's there.
Yep. Then with this going on, with the tighter MU that we have
Yes,
2 Ghost Runners to kind of kickstart the engine.
that's right. We want to find that in conjunction with Netmerker, obviously. But with everyone at some point when doing a stealth build has come a cropper where they didn't have enough stealth credits to boost a particular breaker when they encounter a piece of ice, and then they suffer what that thing is doing to them.
I
So
index in the last store championship that we had. I came in second instead of first because in the grand final, I indexed. They rezzed a fresh piece of ice. I saw 9 points of agendas, and then was 1 stealth credit short of getting back in the second time.
oh, that's
And
painful.
I'm just like, well. And then I got boomed the next turn. But yeah, like,
Oh, well, congratulations on your second place, though.
no, but the point is like
Yes, I know.
the shortage of stealth credits is what's gonna kill you in a stealth deck. So being able to kickstart the engine, I think Ghost Runner in a lot of smoke builds is actually better than Cloak, because
It
once you
is.
get Netmerker going, you're gonna be fine.
I remember watching one of your videos where you had that unfortunate incident of having the networkers on the bottom part of your stack. I think it was against Will, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was literally the last 3 cards worth all 3 copies of Netmerker.
You get those horrible instances, and if you're flush with money in this deck, it's not something you really want to do. But if you have to paintbrush something that your Fractor can deal with, then you can always go in with Corroder and do things the hard way. But as a last measure, of course.
All right, so looking at, we got two net Mercurs. Hopefully nobody is surprised that this is what makes the deck go round. Net Mercur is a really incredible card. It's draw or it's money. It's Desperado or it's John Masanori. What? Seems good.
It's very good. I wish I could put three in there, but I really don't want to go to 41 cards.
No, you're more disciplined than I am.
I it's something that just always feels weird about going to 41. Yeah, when I was with a friend and we did the math, he said, "Well, it's not that big a deal," and I said, "Did it go above a point of a percentage? Then it is a big deal."
Yeah.
But no, I always like trying to cap it at 40.
So we've got 3x Temujin, which is also, not very surprising for smoke build. We're going to be breaking stuff cheaply. It's really good economy. And when you can get in cheap, you can usually make a profit on the Temujin. And late game kind of helps you break even.
Exactly, and it's quite nice when you're up against a heavy R&D, and you've still got to break the subs with normal credits, and with a Temujin on it, then hopefully you're at least breaking even all the time, and it's signaling to the corp, hey, guess what? I'm technically getting into your R&D for nothing. Even with all this ice, it's still costing me technically nothing. So I always like that signal. It works nice with dirty laundry. Just money up.
Yep. So as far as programs are concerned, we have Corroder. Pretty ubiquitous. It's cheap. It's efficient. Have you given any thought to putting Breach in? Not Breach. Sherman.
No, somebody did actually point that out on my deck list, and I never even considered it. It just there were a couple of factors that was coming to mind. The first was the Corroder, which I used pre-Quorum. And since Cipher has been released, then people have been starting to use Inti instead for the. I'm not too big a fan of Blackstone just because of the costs associated with it. But Inti seems to be working quite well with Cipher. Breach is a consideration, but if I was going to make any changes to this, because of the way the meta shifted in the couple of weeks since this has come out to more railguns, I've been really wanting to put in Salset Slums instead, which would mean removing 2 influence, which would be the Corroder for the Inti. But what I wanted to try and do is, because I didn't want to have, when I was building it, I didn't want to heavily rely on my Cipher and my Paintbrush to completely carry the deck. So I wanted to make a series of breakers that would, let's just say that we couldn't put the Cipher out, let's just say that we couldn't get the Paintbrush out, that they would at least handle well on their own accord.
Right.
And Corroder's a great little breaker.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we can do Sherman. I'm actually considering that it's worth a look, especially with Paintbrush. But just for the influence sake, I'm maybe switching it to Inti and just seeing how it holds up.
So we have Refractor. It's really freaking good.
I've had this little problem of going back and forth between this and Houdini. There are times where, Houdini just seems to be working out well, and then there are times where Refractor seems to be working out well. And I've kind of settled on Refractor for the moment. As somebody pointed out, well, you've got Paintbrush, so then you can Paintbrush things as code gates and you can get through. But again, I always try and say, well, I try not to play with Paintbrush always in mind. It's there as a support as opposed to trying to make things kind of like intentional. And you don't want to get into that trap of just constantly paintbrushing everything.
Right.
And
you don't want to lean too heavily on your combo. Your combo is accelerant. It's not the engine.
Exactly. And I like Refractor. It's cheap. It's nice. It's good.
Yeah, I think pound for pound, it has the best numbers on it out of like basically any decoder except for maybe. No, I think because of the restriction, I think this is even better than Cyber Cipher. Like, it's just an incredible refractor.
It is, yes.
So we got Switchblade, which really makes the deck go.
Okay, I've got to say, I've tried it with Dagger. I always keep falling back to Switchblade. Even for the influence, Switchblade is, in your words, pound for pound, it's just so good.
Yeah, I have this argument very frequently with people. They're like, well, if you need influence, you can always just cut Switchblade for Dagger. I'm like, the whole point of playing stealth is to spend less money on ice, not the same amount.
Exactly. So even for the influence, I'd still go back to Switchblade. There's something to look at, when you're looking at a Kamainu and you just cipher it and then just spend the smoke credit and go, yeah, I've just walked through all 7 subroutines. it's so good. And
Yeah.
of course, we can't drop this for Dagger, otherwise Paintbrush will be pretty nulled by it.
Right. So we do have a single cloak as more permanent stealth support in addition to Smoke's credit, but
Yeah.
only as a one-of, which I think is fair. A lot of Smoke decks these days are only running 2 anyway, so I think you can afford to lose one because it's going to go into your 4th normal memory slot.
Yes. So when I was playing with my Kate build and when I had the stealth rig there, I used 2 cloaks and 2 ghost runners with the 2 net Mercurs. But we've got Smoke now, who is effectively a cloak.
Right, forever.
So yes, so we can. So I made that logic to drop it. Obviously, if somebody thought, well, I want more cloaks, well, my reaction would be to just swap out a Dirty Laundry with another cloak. If you just want that second one just for assurances, I think Dirty Laundry is the easiest malleable card in this deck, just to remove and replace with something else. But I'm quite comfortable with one.
Yep. And then, as we've already discussed, we have the Paintbrush, which does all the lovely paintbrush things. You could spend a click to add an additional core subtype, Sentry Code Gate Barrier, onto a piece of ice that's already rezzed. It's very strong. 2
Yeah.
MU, so it takes up a decent part of the rig, which is why Cipher is also necessary.
Yeah.
And then we've got 3 SMCs, which it does SMC stuff. It's the essence of Shaper bullshit.
It is, yes.
But yeah, so this is the deck. It's very lean. It's very tight looking. I think I'm excited. I've only taken the deck for a spin a couple times myself, so I'm excited to watch you pilot it, Mecha. So we're gonna see how it goes. Thank you very much for coming on the show, man.
No problem. Thank you.
And everybody watching at home, you can find him on the forums and other places, and also on Netrunner DB as Mechanoise. We're going to take it for a spin on Test Run, and until we see you all again, always be running.